started our recording. Just basically. So we're back for more. And what we should do is ask people who were not at the earlier session to introduce themselves. I don't think that affects anyone here at the table. Well, were you here this morning? Okay, everybody here? Oh, yeah, everybody's. And then what about online? So, yeah, I see some other name. I think Vera's there. Might be Vera. Yeah.
Vera's here. Am I introducing myself?
Yeah.
Hi. I was here this morning, but I'm back again. Good afternoon, Vera Gianpietro. I'm the Ballard Link Extension Project Manager. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Saranya. Sorry. Hi, I'm Saranya. I'm the West Seattle Link Extension Project Manager with TOD ST3 program. Thank you.
Brad Phillips.
Hello, just public here listening.
Okay, but you are a member of the public. Okay, we'll ask you if you're interested in public comment. I see another Phoebe Wu. She's from the team. Oh, yeah, so she's here. She stepped back to her. Yes. Okay, I think we're good to go. We're going to look at the next station, Avalon. Kevin is taking the action for that. And we're going to stay with our structure. And so the Sound Transit team is going to start with the presentation. Got anything?
Okay, thanks. And again, I'm Jason Hampton with Sound Transit at the West Seattle Link Extension. We're going to start this session to discuss the Avalon station. So here again, we have a map that shows the area of the Avalon station. And again, I'll be going over the station area context and kind of the history of what led to this alternative, similar to what we did for Alaska Junction. And then we'll turn it over to Darren and Julie to talk about the concept evolution, the PV station environment, and the PV station architecture. So just pre-warning, these are the same slides I showed before, but it's a little bit different narrative here. Again, we started the planning process back in 2017. And as I described with the Alaska Junction station, we went through various levels of scoping and assessment before moving into the environmental phase, which started with a draft EIS in 2019 and is continuing. We anticipate that final EIS later this year. I'm going to skip to each of these slides and just quickly note again, we went through level 1, level 2, level 3 analysis with a stakeholder advisory group and an elected leadership group, ultimately making recommendations to the board for inclusion in the draft EIS. Again, the Yancey Andover alignment was something that came out of initial assessments that were requested by the board in order to minimize residential displacements in North Delridge and also to connect to tunnel stations in the junction, but in a more affordable way. And I think that's a really important point for Avalon, because in order to have a tunnel station in the junction with a below grade Avalon station, this alignment through Delridge is necessary to meet the costs, the lower cost for that alternative. So following that initial assessment, the board identified all of the alternatives for the draft EIS. We shared this before, including those alternatives that could connect either the tunnel or the elevated. And then after the EIS comment period, which we talked about having over 5,000 comments, agencies, tribes, and the public, they modified and confirmed the preferred alternative for the West Seattle Link extension, which includes a retained cut station at Avalon that connects to a tunnel station at Alaska Junction. And just a couple of things that we heard through this entire process before handing it over to Darren are, it's really, there was a strong interest in a tunnel station at the junction to be more affordable and comparable to the elevated alternatives that were in the draft EIS. And this alignment does that. There's also interest in lower height guideway throughout Delridge. And by connecting to a retained cut and then into a retained cut station, we're able to lower the elevated guideway and the station height at Delridge as well. There's also a really strong interest in the connections between the buses on 35th, which serve communities to the south, including High Point, and a really great transfer environment. So having entrances on both sides of 35th eliminates that crossing of a busy street for many people as they're transferring between bus and rail. And we're going to get into more about the station area contact plan, but I'll.
So
Yeah.
is there a section that shows, you know, here's Delridge, here's Alaska, here's why this was the happy medium?
Something akin to what we would be doing in the future review of Delridge. So in today's, we're dealing with everything from Avalon out to Alaska.
So we'll go back the other way next time.
But next, yeah, when we come back and talk about Delridge, we'll be talking about the elevated guideway on either side.
Thanks, but they're certainly connected, so it's a really great question. Just over to-
Right. Similarly to Alaska, I'll sort of walk through some of those early ideas in the first couple of phases. Again, we're talking about years of work in a single slide, but just to set the stage. Obviously, this is a really dynamic intersection with ostensibly 3 different arterials converging at the same place. Also, there are, key pieces of recent development and future development likely to happen. Some small commercial corridor, as well as important community locations, YMCA, West Seattle Stadium, among them. And so at the time, the team highlighted how can you locate pickup drop-off and prioritize safe pedestrian and bike circulation as a priority. And is there ways to connect the key destinations through those paths? As Jason outlined, the cut and cover actually provides some opportunities for locating the station at the crossroads that I think we'll start to see some of those in the next few slides. But here you can see some of that next level of analysis that happened around existing land uses, our ridership forecasts, and how people will get to the station, with the primary being walking within the station area, and the next being bus connections. The priorities that I just want to highlight that were reinforced at this phase again, similar pedestrian safety at the busy intersections, helping provide a logical ped and bike flow to the stations, and is there an opportunity to create new and enhanced public spaces in the rural area? Here at Avalon Station, again, it is rooted in that emergent urban land use type. We'll see that there's recent developments happening in and around the station, but it is primarily located in the south and east quadrants of the station area. So there's potentially more to happen around there. This doesn't have the large block sizes that Alaska Junction does, but it is, because of those arterials, split up between, you don't have that great continued connection between, but because it is a walkable, we're noting as a walk, bike, roll station, because of that mode share expected to be primarily walking, how do we take that into account as we consider our improvements in and around that station? As we look to that right side of the screen, we see that it could move. You can see sort of the arrows of potential movement between It could continue to be a walk bike roll station or within the established urban. But we see that it becoming more multimodal over time as bus connections and people get used to using light rail in the area and maybe utilizing those connections in the future. Here we're looking at the GIS concept retained cut station. We have a north entrance or east side entrance on the east side of 35th. That is approximately located where the Pecos Pit is currently, if you're familiar with that area. And there's also a station entrance on the west side in that triangle property, which is now currently Taco Time and Starbucks. We point out that we're looking to provide those bike or bus connections close to the station. And at that time, King County Metro was looking to put bus stops more rooted on Avalon to make that connection, in addition to on 35th, right in front of the station areas. They located Pluto and paratransit on Southwest Genesee Street by that northeast penthouse. Again, quieter location outside of the movement of buses and the key pedestrian and bicycle movements. This is also the portal location, as Jason mentioned, as a retained cut. You're coming from the northeast into a retained station area, and as it goes under 35th and to the west, that is where the portal and the start of the tunnel begins. And so there are those similar ancillary facilities that are necessary to provide air and circulation there. You'll notice in some of these subsequent diagrams that the station locations were in a different place, but ostensibly the same takeaways that are noted here transfer over to where the preferred alternative landed. So at that time, we said some of the priorities were, again, can we partner with the city to upgrade facilities for bikes and pedestrians connecting in the neighborhood greenways? How do we locate bike storage that is in a easy and accessible way for those who use that? And then number 3 is explore potential elimination of the slip lane to reduce conflicts of pedestrians, narrow that cross section, etc. Thinking about bus connections, how do we, again, provide those seamless transfers that happen to neighborhoods from the north and to the south, like High Point? So there's a concerted effort to locate those bus stops in close proximity to the station. I think there's also interest in exploring slow streets for Pluto and those bus zones, perhaps coordinating traffic signals or crossings. There's some of those other operational types of things that you can do for safe pedestrian and bike. As we look to support current and future land uses, we've seen quite a bit of growth in the West Seattle Triangle area over the last few years, and more is planned. How can we cite the stations to further that interest in the neighborhood? Can we support active uses along those key corridors and frontages of the either the stations and or with the development that happens adjacent to it? And also consider, public spaces that enhance the station entrances. Can we create plazas wide sidewalks? We'll see some of that coming. That, you know, again, accommodate for that transfer zone and a mixing zone between different modes that we see coming to the station, including transit transfers. As we move to the preliminary engineering concept plan, you'll see that where we ended at preferred alternatives gas is quite similar to what we see here in the PE concept. With some slight modifications, you'll see that we've added at this point a pedestrian crossing on that east side leg of the West Seattle Bridge, crossing Fauntleroy Way southwest, north to 35th. You'll also see a change in where the bus stops are located. King County Metro continue to look at how best to provide frequent bus access, and decided to remove the bus stops on Southwest Avalon Way and use existing bus stops near the West Seattle Stadium. We still do have some buses that land right at the entrance on either side of 35th. I'll also note that, as I mentioned, ancillary facilities that need to co-locate with the tunnel portal are at that triangle location, and so that footprint of the building is somewhat bigger. Just to quickly walk through some of the modes independent of themselves. Crosswalks, as I mentioned, were added this to reduce the number of arterial crossings. This also is, supports the two entrance station location by reducing one of the arterial crossings if we can. Widen sidewalks per the design guidelines and Streets Illustrated. And we suggested modifying some of the curb edges to safely resolve transition potentially to neighborhood greenways of 36, which is being considered by the city. Bike lanes, there are existing bike lanes on Southwest Avalon Way. We are bringing those up onto the sidewalk for access to long-term bike parking. You'll notice that the bike parking spaces are reduced because they're tied to our ridership numbers. And so you'll see long-term at 20 spaces and then 10 short-term bike rack spaces. And we fully expect that the Greenway would also connect well into these networks. Transit integration, I noted some of where the bus stops are relocated during this PE phase, and also that the paratransit ADA Pluto or pickup drop off are co-located at that northeast entrance with its own space. Here we're showing pickup drop off that northeast entrance on a quiet street. It's supported by the city and our guidelines. As we take a look at TOD, all of the transit-oriented development sites at Avalon are adjacent transit-oriented development sites. None are expected to be joint development opportunities. Part of that is just the geometry and access points, potential access points, and just the size and space that is necessary for the stations themselves and the complexities around that retained cut. condition. And so we feel like the best opportunities for development is in those adjacent sites that we are using for staging and construction during the construction of the line and the stations. I will note that I didn't put a number across the street at Fauntleroy to the west, but that is also expected at this point to be part of the staging area, but that would also be a development.
So where is that? On the other side of Palm.
There's a, yeah,
That is right there.
yeah, with the sand shape. Plazas are provided at each of the station entrances, providing that sort of transition space from sidewalk to the station lobbies themselves. And here I've just noted on there that we are also dealing with quite a bit of grade, particularly in that triangle piece. And so you sort of get an understanding of how we need to navigate those different levels from the different corners of that triangle space, and having to use that plaza space to make that transition. Noted here are potential places for wayfinding, public art, either in and around the station, leaning rails for where there are bus transfer locations for waiting. Here you get a better sense of where potential TOD and what kind of massing that might provide in and around the station, those properties that we are using for staging and construction. These again are all adjacent, so future, not during the construction of the station, but post construction. Key themes from the fall engagement. This is a lower ridership station location, and we see that in how respondents said that they would use this as their primary station, and that the walking and transit are somewhat in line with what our projections would see as the split of mode. And similar to what we saw at Alaska Junction, that people primarily want to see more affordable housing and rental housing as their primary TOD use. And for at the ground floor level of those activated streets, food and drink, retail and convenience and errands being those top priorities among them. In language focus group, we heard wider sidewalks and making safe access to the station a primary consideration. And is there an opportunity to provide a youth focused space? So that we'll take that as we think about programming in the next phase of design and plan.
Okay, then shifting to inside the station. So this is showing a cutaway axonometric view of Avalon Station. And so you can imagine that the tracks are entering into the station from the right, and we're just below grade here. We're at about 27 feet below grade from street level to platform level. And then part of the platform is covered by the 35th Avenue and plaza up above. We've got 2 head houses with 2 elevators each, and stairs down to the platform. And then we also have the fan plant. So again, this is the end of a tunnel, and we've got to be able to evacuate the air in the event that smoke builds up. You do that at the end of the tunnels, you suck the air out and for the safety. So there's no space between where the trains go and grade to put that fan plant. So that's why it's above ground, and it is integrated into the head house of the lobby. So Dirk, you need to put yourself on mute, but thanks for being here.
I just wanted to follow up with you.
I might be.
Can you mute him? All right. All right. So, so now we're looking at more of an aerial view of axisymmetric, and we've integrated some of these green pathways of pedestrian paths coming into the station. I believe the data says that most people are actually riding from that south side of the site. And so a lot of the stations oriented that way, but you can enter from the north side of the site. So you see the passenger pickup and drop off loop on the right-hand side of the page. 35th Avenue is going up and down, Avalon's going straight across, and Fauntleroy is diagonal here. So you can see that on the left-hand side, left-hand head house in the triangular lot, about half of that space is dedicated to the lobby space, and then the other half is back of house spaces. We do recognize that that does make more of a wall that is, around that place. Keep in mind, this is preliminary engineering. You've got a lot of room to work with in the design to make things more appealing at the street level. So anyway, we've got the two entry lobbies, and both of those go down to the station below. So next one. So here's our diagram showing those decision points. It's a little simpler in this station, right? We've got two head houses. The elevators take you straight to the platform. The stairs take you straight to the platform, and you still have the opportunity to buy tickets and so forth. On the triangular parcel, you can see on the Fauntleroy side, there's a bit of a grade change from Fauntleroy to the lobby. And so we have stairs, and it's a little hard to see, but there is a ramp that navigates that as well, so that people can access the station entry from that side, as well as from the corner. On the right-hand side of the page, again, a very straightforward lobby. Walk in, excuse me, you decide if you need to buy your ticket or not, and then you are able to go into the fair pay zone and then choose your vertical circulation. Oh, I should say bike cages here. The bike cage is on the triangle parcel. And so that's where here's a view of the platform. Just like at Alaska Junction, the elevators, or there's a pair of elevators almost at the dead center of the platform. And then the other pair of elevators is on the western side of the platform. And again, center platform, and signage, all of our basics there. Barbara, can I ask you maybe to describe what art might go in?
Yeah, well, one aspect that you have not really come to life on these site diagrams is how busy the traffic is around there and how kind of motion noisy it is around that station. So we're trying to think about that and the fact that we've heard the neighborhood feels that this is a gateway spot as you're coming off the West Seattle Bridge, and the grade is funky here that we need to keep our eye on. But there is a wall on the left side of that screen, I don't know how to describe it, that could be a site for like some two-dimensional surface artwork. And then we're looking at the plazas maybe to see what we can do, and if that's a Lashunzi spot or if that's some kind of a vertical treatment for the gateway. But it's a hard site to make friendly for pedestrians. So that's what we're thinking about. How can we make it friendlier for pedestrians?
Okay, so this is showing the massing overall. It shows some of the street trees. It shows the plazas that are in sort of the south to southeast of the stations. So on that triangular property, there's plaza and entry going from the corner up into the station space. This landscaping. It's not called out here, but there's that open space that could be available, that would be available for TOD. And then the passenger drop-off area. In the open cut, you see those struts that are holding the sides of the walls. They're helping support those. And then we also would have we require a throw barrier when we have open rails like that. And so that's an opportunity for doing something along that as well. Here are some vignettes. This one is as if you were crossing Fauntleroy. And so the triangular site in this case is actually off to your right, and then the other head house is to your left. And so you're just getting some of the sense of massing, again, the openness, transparency on the lobbies, and a very real simplicity of figuring out where you need to go. Then this is as though you were on Avalon, looking north to the station. And so you're in the future, we'll have to ghost in some of those TOD parcels. And then you can see the entryways as they would be seen from Avalon. And then this area, let's see, on the left-hand side, this is a vignette of what the entry looks like, more of a close-in view. But as you were coming from Fauntleroy and entering into the north side of that head house. And then on the right-hand side, same head house, but we're looking at it more closely from the south side. Again, lots of transparency. You can see right through it. You can really understand where you need to go and see in the distance. And that is our overview of Avalon for you. So hopefully that was somewhat helpful and for getting it.
We should see if there's any public comment. The person sitting in the public. So, Mr. Phillips, did you want to make a comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. And then how about other departments or agencies? Any comments, other city staff?
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. You're welcome. So Kevin?
Okay, thanks, Jill, and thank you for your presentation. We'll do the same thing here that we did with Alaska Junction Station. We're going to do questions first and then comments. We won't do round robin, so I'll ask for a show of hands. And we'll organize the questions and comments in the same category. So the first will be general background, program, form, character. There's a lot there. And then access and circulation. Then sustainability, engagement, and equity. And then information needed for 30% review, which I suspect will be more of a discussion topic, but if people have questions about that, that's fair. So let's start with general program, form, character. Who has a question? Ben, you're on.
Wondering if, so I understand that the fan plan is the exhaust for the whole tunnel. Is there a reason that it couldn't be, did you go to page 111? Just flip, like move to the other side. So instead of being on that corner, which seems like it could be fairly active, kind of little commercial corner, could it just be flipped to the other side, sort of in the cut portion, and maybe extend the, or even to the other side of the other head house, so it wasn't right there.
Yeah. Hey, Dirk, since you're on the call, hopefully you heard the question, but can you help us out?
Can I answer the question about the ventilation building? Well, I can give some indication for the reason why it is there. And the intent for that ventilation building is to vent the tunnel, not necessarily to provide ventilation for the station. The intent of this design is to maintain the station somewhat as a station that doesn't really need ventilation. So if you were to put it on the other side, you would have to basically cover this station and vent the entire station. So it's very strategically placed to limit the size of it and to keep the necessary fire zones in this tunnel versus this station. So it's if you were to place it on the other side, it will change the entire ventilation and fire protection design.
So it needs to be adjacent to the tunnel, is what you're saying.
Yeah, right now it's right above, it's right at the end of the tunnels and vents those tunnels. If you go to Alaska Junction where you could see the vents, there's a vent building all the way at the end. That vent building takes care of Alaska Station plus the tunnel, right? Or divvied up like that. If you were to place this vent building on the other side of the station, you will also need to vent this station, and that puts it in a different category. So there's all kinds of fire protection and ventilation design behind it. Just moving it for spatial reasons will bring all those ventilation engineering aspects to it, and you'll change the station.
Are there any other stations in the systems that are like an open cut like this?
Chinatown International District
Yeah.
and the new Spring District station over in Mobile.
So are you really having to vent the station, or are you having to put massive amounts of ductwork to wherever you want to exhaust?
Well, it would change, it would both change the fire zones. Right now, this station is a bit of a hybrid. It's different than Spring, and it's different than the other one you mentioned, CID. CID is just an open station. This one, this one is a little different than that. It's a little bit more of a hybrid. But the point, though, is if for reasons of like aesthetics and you wanted to move this vent building to the other side, as was asked, you will have to change the ventilation for this system, and you will have to vent the station, and you will have to do a number of other things. So it's a major change. It's not just moving a building. It's like changing the fire protection aspects of this station.
So, adding on to that, can you explain what the gray fencing is enclosing there? South of the wall? North of the wall, to the left of the wall?
Are you talking about the fencing along the cut?
No, I'm talking about sticking with this vent structure.
Oh, I see.
I think we've previously seen the wall, but now we're seeing a gray, 2 foot shorter maybe fence enclosing some outdoor equipment.
Oh, that was like that before.
Was it in a different rendering? Yeah, okay. But what is it? There's some open air equipment there. Is that part of the ventilation?
I believe so.
Must be something that has to exhaust to air.
Yeah.
And does that fan plant need to be aligned with the tunnel? So I'm hearing the reasons for it being between the head houses and the tunnel. Does it need to be in alignment with the tunnel? Can it be shifted off to the side of the tunnel?
share 90 degrees.
Unmute Dirk.
Yeah, it's hard to see exactly how the ductwork, the internal ductwork is, but obviously you can play with the ductwork and put something a little bit in a different location, but within this triangle, I would think it's going to be very difficult. But it's placed, I think that was your initial point, it's placed at the end of the two tubes, obviously be very, very efficient this way. Now there's internal duct work. Can you reroute things there? It's possible that to look at that and look at how that building would be affected by it. But I'm not sure, whether you could place it, within this triangle. There's another little there's very little room to maneuver this building.
But I guess just to clarify, let's just say that the tunnel didn't stop where the fan station is. Say the tunnel stopped at the, block to the stage right, northeast, I guess, on the other side. So the tunnel extends another block and the fan station was at the other end. That would be just like another station. It would just be extended. Is that correct?
So I think I'm tracking what you're saying. If you move the fan plant over basically to the other end of the station.
That,
Yeah.
like, it's just right there and you're just extending the tunnel.
Then we have to cover the entire station. And as Dirk was saying, that actually puts the station in a completely different category from a fire life safety standpoint. So in this configuration that we're seeing, it's an open station and there's much more natural ventilation and a lot less cost for the fire protection and fire life safety elements. So moving that fan plant to the end.
We put it in the same categorization as like the one of the California station.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's more of a cost consideration for efficiency than.
It's a pretty big cost consideration, yeah.
Thank you.
Jay?
So I'm gonna ask the elephant in the room here, I suppose, of why did we change from having access on either side of Fauntleroy, particularly for those bicyclists, pedestrians, or roller users, to having both access points at each side?
I can take that. The drawings that Darren was showing as far as the DEIS concept, those were based on the preferred alternative for the DEIS preferred tunnel, which was a full deep tunnel at Avalon and Alaska Junction. I talked about the new alternatives that the board, for the alternatives north with the Yancey Andover corridor that connected to the retained cut. And those had a different alignment. And that station includes entrances on both sides of 35th. So it's two different alternatives that we were looking at. Like what Darren was trying to get with the EIS plans is the elements of feedback that we heard on that help lead to the considerations for this design. So.
Okay, and there wasn't any way with this design to maintain some type of entrance point on the west side of Fauntleroy that doesn't require you to cross that street.
With the location of the station, it wouldn't work. And there's, you'd have to, I would need Dirk to speak to this, but you'd need to, because of all the roadways, you have to cut under all of them rather than just the two. It'd be really challenging to have a station there. So you'd have 35th and fall right over the top of the station.
Can you go to 99, it's 99 on our packet, I don't think it really gets to some of this stuff. Because it works against, that's not the right one. It's the TOD, shows your, it's the TOD. joint development activity concepts. Talk about that, okay. There you go, right there. Because, and then I want to go back to the emergent versus the established. So I totally get it, even more so, I think, than Alaska, how what an emergent neighborhood this is. But it seems to me like what you're starting off with is bus transfers. And what you're hoping to have is people in the neighborhood who use the station. So walk like roll would increase if all of those are multi-story apartments, right? And I'm not quite sure that that's quite how you structured your analysis. But it's almost like you're betting against that future with the not straddling Fauntleroy and the blank wall facing D&E. And so it's just that, I mean, I'd love if you could talk about how do you balance that? How do you, and then how do you balance, so far the questions we've heard are engineering and economic, meaning every one of these. But how do you soften that trade-off so that everybody gets to win a little bit, rather than it all just being engineered in order to have this future?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that we haven't talked about, which is Fauntleroy Way Boulevard project that the city has planned and designed to a certain point in our, we're sort of had put on pause, and correct me if I'm misstating anything, but they kind of put on pause until the station location settled down. And so now that we have a preferred alternative, assuming the board acts on this alternative, then they can make modifications to that Fauntleroy Boulevard that I would say is much more beneficial to pedestrians and bicyclists going forward than the current iteration of Fauntleroy Way. Okay. And so I think, you know, we don't show that in our plans because that is a city project still in design. And so I think there are benefits that we're not quite fully showing you based on that. I think there's also additional neighborhood greenway projects that will make some of these intersections much more hospitable to pedestrians and bicyclists. And that will, as those plans shake out, those are some of these intersections really are still in coordination and collaboration between the city and Sound Transit. And I think as those progress forward, you'll see this is a tough spot. No one's going to argue that point, right? But I think there are things in the works that between the city and Sound Transit that will make this intersection better for those users.
So we're starting to get into access and circulation, not surprisingly. But I just want to, before we just jump there, I want to make sure we kind of just stay on this topic. I do have one kind of follow-up question to Jill.
And can I just remind everyone too to ask clarifying questions that are fairly succinct to answer?
Yes.
And then, because we're rolling into discussion.
Right.
That's-
So thank you for that. That's, I agree with that. So I think, Julie, I thought you mentioned, I heard you say that for maybe it's your ridership forecast, so you think most of your riders are going to come from the south. Can you sort of, because I'm really interested, given the challenges of this site, where do you think your riders are going to come from? Because that should say a lot about how this is designed, right? So where do you see that happen?
Well, I think they're going to be coming from all sides, right? And
Right.
the data was just, there was a little bit more coming from the south. So it's not like people are not coming from the north. And like, as you just pointed out, with that TOD on the other side of Fauntleroy, that's going to change. Right?
And when you say from the south, that includes High Point, I would guess.
Some bus transfers, yeah.
Bus, exactly.
I'm sorry, if you want to-
Oh, and just to say, like Avalon, I would include Avalon Way as obviously a corridor of recent development. That is also,
Yeah.
it's kind of southeast, but you get it right.
I think we're trying to understand how the flow
Yes.
to the station impacts.
Primarily from this.
Yeah, I think that's a deal. Molly, did you have a question?
Related to form, I just wanted to understand if TOD overbuild was ever considered on that triangular site?
We looked at it, but it was not efficient. And access, as you can probably assume, is very, very difficult, both from pedestrian, sort of landing the necessary vertical circulation for an overbuild in relation to the fan plant, in relation to the station. Having the fan plant there reduces, it's a bigger thing. It has the, you have to be 50 feet away from that ventilation. So it really just made it not really a feasible opportunity.
Probably jump to access circulation. Any other forum questions? Yeah.
I'd just like to pick on that a little bit. Seems like we're having different rules for this station compared to the other station that we were just talking about. And I think if we're worried about a fan plant here in the middle of a triangle, 50 feet away from everything, we're putting it in a residential neighborhood, the end of the other track, right? Like, so how do we balance? How do we balance the comment of like, this is where it should be versus this is where we want it to be? What you just said about difficulty of access to this site precluding a TOD
For services and
Yeah.
vehicle.
But yet we want to put a station on it. I'm struggling with those two ideas and how do they balance each other?
Sure, well, for a station like this, we don't have big service vehicles, you don't have people moving in and out of their apartments, you don't have a bank of elevators. We've already included the elevators that we need here, so, yeah, I mean, I just think that this, I know that they studied it, there's, if they could do TOD as a pilot. But, and some of these things are just facts of what has to be in place to have a working, safe tunnel.
Any other questions? Before we move on?
I have one
Okay.
last question.
Speak to your hands up,
Are there any opportunities to activate that open section, Because I can see, like, if we're seeing this as an emerging urban form, and I understand it's right next to a section of freeway, so how much people want to be there is another question, but has it even been talked about? Or can you activate that at all? And visually, physically, is there art opportunities? Are there park opportunities? Are there?
I think all of that's on the table as we go on final design.
Okay.
Is it a throw?
Yeah, edge, 8 feet. 8 feet. And our standard tends to be like what we see down at our central maintenance facility, just a standard black picket fence, but I imagine in this place.
And then just really quick, just about dimensions, support beams for the routine cut. How, like, if sidewalk grade is here, where are they in relation to sidewalk?
I think they're a little bit below sidewalk.
It look like they're from this.
You can sort of see it here, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. If you squint.
Yeah, no, I see it. Yeah, I assumed that they were slightly below.
Yeah.
Ben, did you have another question?
More of just, I mean, you guys, I just want to understand if you guys are aware of the lumber yard across the street, the development that's proposed. It's gone through your design guidance, and so I think there's like 5. It's unclear to me how many units there are. 500 plus. Something like that. Yeah, a lot of them, and I think. So maybe my question is, with that and the planning, it's been through, I believe it's been approved on design review. How the fan house or the fan building, how it relates to all those units right across the street from it, because I think that fan building, it'd be kind of like the one on top of Beacon Hill. Would it be sort of like that, like a blank wall? There's not much going on in the fan building itself, right? It's just a box. right? It doesn't have any opportunities for commercial or anything, right? It's just sort of, I'm just wondering how it relates to the buildings across the street. And then,
It's a great consideration to think about as that, you know, that really takes form and shape and we think about it from different views.
Okay, and I'd like to do one more and then I'd like to move on.
One more
That's why I have a lot of excess circulation questions.
One more question on the fan building. So is there any possibility that those things can be moved below grade? But like adjacent to the station, so like under that plaza, for example, like.
Oh, I see.
Can more of the machinery go below grade? Obviously, there's still gonna be ductwork coming up. I
Sure.
understand that, but is there a below grade solution in the same general vicinity that takes significant chunk of the bulk out of the above grade portion?
Yeah. Dirk, I'm not sure if that's something we looked at, to take some or all of the fan machinery from above grade to basically beside the station or beside the tunnel, some below grade.
No, we don't have looked at that. We have not looked at that. That would be a little bit counterintuitive from a ventilation perspective. So the answer is no, we have not. We could take a look and see if what that means.
Is
Yeah,
it
I
feasible?
understand the most direct route is straight up.
Straight, exactly, whereas
But,
this would be
you know, I
going
think
up to the side.
As I'd say, potential in a way, you know, if there's a way to take some of that bulk down, even if it involves some, you know, new below grade spaces and some massive big ass ducts. You know, is that something that could be studied, I guess? Because I think, you know, it's the extreme kind of bulk of this and blankness of this that we're all reacting to, so. Yeah, I think
We can certainly take a look. I wouldn't underestimate, you know, the size of the fans and the issues with the duct bank when it comes to, you know, the design of that. But we'll definitely take, you know, this is all about getting input and giving you some feedback on it. I'm not necessarily the right person to answer that in great detail, but I do think it's worth taking a look at, and we can definitely give you better feedback on that, whether that's feasible or whether it would offer better opportunities for the site in general. Sure.
Thanks.
So I'm going to jump us into access circulation questions. I'm going to take the prerogative and ask the first one. Sorry. Could you go to, sorry, it was a slide you were on previously that showed, yeah, yeah, maybe that'll work. So what I'm curious about, seems like those bus stops on 35th are pretty important in terms of lining those up with the station access points. But, and I know you're not Metro, and I know you're not SDOT, but SDOT's in the room here. And I know we're not getting into specific channelization questions today, but there's a slip ramp right turn from 35th onto the bridge. I don't understand how a bus stop works there, just to be candid. I don't, right now it wouldn't work. So can you say more about that?
Well, at this time, this was, we removed, as part of our PE explorations, we removed the slip lane that you were talking about from 35th to West Seattle Bridge, and the slip lane from West Seattle Bridge to 35th North. Okay. In an effort that you might remember.
So those that you're presumed, those are part of your design, those are gone.
We had those as conversations with SDOT during PE, and we had suggested those as possibilities to, again, prioritize pedestrian movements and safe crossings and reduce some of those widths. As you know, recently SDOT has suggested a different approach to that intersection, reintroducing the lanes. So we have work to do between the two of us to figure out a solution that allows for that vehicular movement back into this location. So that's why what you're seeing here removes those slip lanes. It was in an effort for pedestrian priority, but we'll continue to see how that pans out as we work together.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think we all understand that the street and road work is a work in progress, and it's a partnership. I'm still struggling with the station location is pretty closely tied to where that bus stop is, so I think it's hard to think about one without the other, so, but I understand that that's.
I think we actually maybe flipped it in that we used station location to help locate that particular bus stop.
Okay.
To facilitate the connection.
Okay.
That bus stop could just as, because this particular route continues north on 35th.
Right.
It could just as easily, if the station was not there, be where it probably is today, which is south of Avalon Way, right? So, but because this particular route continues north on 35th, we saw with King County Metro, everything move it closer to the station location.
Okay, thank you. Other access circulation.
I think it's dawning on me that this station doesn't have a concourse level, and therefore side access to your platform is very much restricted. To going back to our comment about under a roadway, circulation is very difficult because you can't access that same area on the roadway. In this, we don't have a roadway, so we can access it. But because it doesn't have a concourse level, we can't access the sides. Because this same station previously has a concourse level, which allows us to do these
Sort of put the head house
40
offset.
right? And so if we had a concourse level, then we could cross the streets. Because we don't have a concourse level, we're stuck with only an alignment with this. That's coming through pretty clearly that that's a restriction. There's a benefit in keeping it up, is now maybe it's open air and cheaper station. Have we explored a lower station to get a concourse and allow us to do some of these side access things?
Well, I think in some of the earlier alternatives that Jason was talking about, there was a deeper Avalon station. And then in the balance, in order to make an underground station at Alaska Junction affordable, this was the alignment that allowed us to balance out the cost and have that.
This is where we're saving money for the other station.
Well, remember in the ST3 things that we all voted on, that Alaska Junction was above ground. And so then this was a change to put Alaska Junction below grade. And in order to do that and keep things within the overall budget, the overall expectations, that's where this ends up being a shallower, but essentially below grade station.
Is there any other studies that are going on that affect that? You said there's some Fauntleroy changes that might impact this. Do we know of anything else that we're waiting on?
Well, there's also, I also mentioned the Radar Greenway and potential improvements to that on 36, which connects bikes both in the south and to the north neighborhoods, and would contemplate additional intersection improvements.
Bill, did you want to?
No.
Okay, Jay and then Sue.
Taking one step back to the bus. Yeah, I understand that you aren't King County Metro, but what bus route is stopping north of Avalon? Because Rapid Ride turns onto Avalon, so does this, that 21X I don't see any, maybe the 21X is the only one I see that goes on Fauntleroy. So is this rerouting existing routes?
This also contemplates what Metro connects, forgetting what, 40 or something like that. We'd have to get them in the room, they're the experts, but this contemplates future routing associated once the station opens.
So this is considering the opportunity to change existing routes to prioritize bus stop locations and station location.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I believe that route connects neighborhoods to the north and to the south as a local bus and primarily. It is not one that connects to downtown, for instance, like Sea Line or the 21.
Okay, I think that would also be good for us to know is if that bus stop is just for that new local route, or if it's also for all of the other routes that are coming from Seattle that go through this area.
Most of the other routes stop now south of Avalon and will cross Avalon to make the connection to the station.
And that's not gonna change. I mean, again, I know that you can't be working on.
As much as we
As you know.
that's the current thinking. Yeah.
Okay, so this would just be for that new local bus.
I'm not sure it's new, but
Well,
whatever it is, yeah. The local.
okay, the local.
So I just got a couple of questions on the pickup drop off lane. So I guess first question was, as you mentioned, Genesee is a very small kind of residential street right now. Seems like a very long way to get out after you did complete the drop off if you're traveling east, for example. I was just curious if you ever explored kind of looping around on that number one parcel, or if there was any other routing that is considered, and I guess also just the proximity of the intersection at Avalon to 35th seems quite close. So.
It is close.
Yeah.
So that one, we worked with SDOT, of course, to that particular intersection would be right in, right out. Okay. And we were working with SDOT also to provide a left turn entrance at Genesee down the hill to get into and around on Genesee. So yeah, it's not, I mean, we want to provide that safe connection, particularly for paratransit users. And because of the context that we're in, particularly on the west head house, this was the best opportunity to provide that safe location for that.
The question is related to that. So are you removing parking on Genesee then to make it so that there can be two-way traffic on the pickup drop-off loop? Because right now there's only space, there's parking on both sides of the street, one direction. It's a local street.
I don't know that we've gotten to that level.
Okay,
So yeah.
we can maybe come back to this.
Did you have another question? You said you had a question.
Well, just kind of if there were any other routings considered, but I think that's right.
I want to make sure we have time for sustainability engagement topic. So any other access regulation questions? Okay, can we move to sustainability engagement and equity? Questions about that?
I have an equity question that has been touched on a little bit already, but just from the perspective of a community member that lives in this area, the 53% of the pedestrians in this emergent urban area, how would you respond as Sound Transit, understanding that partners are considering mitigation efforts for Fauntleroy, but specifically for Sound Transit, we're doing kind of the big chess piece moves in this location for buildings. How would you explain to a community member who would raise a concern, an equity concern about privileging private development access across on Fauntleroy versus public access being located in the least accessible location for pedestrians?
Well, I guess I don't quite see it in that same light, that I get the point. We know, if you look back to this morning and Lita's slides about our analysis and understanding of neighborhoods to the south and providing good access for those neighborhoods that are primarily non-white, we are really trying to meet them where they live and get them safe and clear access to light rail if they choose to use it. And that is why we're trying to provide these seamless connections as best we can for those transfer users. We can't say that necessarily any of these developments, who they're for. We prioritize affordable housing as part of our TOD process and strategy. So how those shake out over time, we'll see how that works. But that affordable housing, trying to provide the best access to our stations, no matter where you are, who you are, really is our priority.
So I have sort of a little bit of a related question, because I was curious when I actually read through this city, you kind of report, and then looked at your slide about what kind of your admittedly broad level summary about what you heard, which is a lot of stuff. So I know it's hard to sift through that exactly, but I'm just curious, when you talk to people in this community, where pedestrian safety ranked in terms of the comments or concerns you heard.
I think it's woven. I'll go back to that slide just for a moment. Safe and vibrant, as I mentioned, is a top priority and preference for every station, from everybody that I talk to, no matter who you are or where you live. And so it is always the top of our minds.
It's at the top of your mind, which I appreciate, but in terms of, again, what you heard from the community, was it, we really want the station here, I'm asking for a summary of what you've heard from people who live here now about this topic. If there's a way to sort of summarize that. I know it's hard a lot.
We've heard a lot to kind of dovetail on what Naren said. With all of the alternatives, this area around Avalon is challenging. We've heard, it's very important to create safe connections between one side of the station area and the other side for all of the stations. And so that's what we really look to do with this station. We've heard a lot from folks who are within the bus transfer shed that direct connections from bus stops to the station are good. In fact, that was one of the factors that the board considered when they thought about this in the preferred alternative, because you have those bus stops on both sides of 30th, right? With the station entrance on the west side of Fauntleroy, you didn't have as direct of a connection. You would have had to cross an arterial from that bus. We heard a lot about the desire to have the guideway lower in Delridge, and to have a tunnel station at Alaska Junction. Both of those things are really factors in where this station landed and the depth of the station. So it's bigger than just this station. But I think safety and vibrancy is a big theme here for all of them.
And I think, Kevin, that's part of why it's really hard for us to ask questions without being in a discussion, because it's happening at the stations on either end of driving this.
Right. I think
So we should probably move towards this as we can if we're going to be discussing.
Other questions on this topic? And I think Jill's right. I think we probably want to get into our discussion. So just with regard to information needed for 30% or before, I think that'll be a discussion topic, but any questions anybody wants to raise? Okay, great. So now we will head into our discussion. I would ask again that as commissioners, we're sort of talking to each other, trying to come to a consensus. Since I'm the action taker, I'll ask that you probably be very clear about, we be very clear about our recommendations. I may ask for clarity if I'm not getting it, because sometimes I don't get it. So let's just start with, again, the first topic, which is general program form and character. And I'll invite anybody who wants to get off.
Well, again, I'll say what I just sort of said to you, to everybody. I think what's driving all the words is 2 stations on either side of it, not this station. And I think they've done heroic work to eke a station out here with all the drivers they have. But now it's time to put some attention to those things on the station itself. And what we've heard is that really the just working out the engineering has taken a lot of energy. Now some questions come about, can some of that be compromised or not win every discussion to create a better character and form at the station, not just to enable Fauntleroy to be what you want it to be, and to enable Alaska to be. And I think that's probably what we're going to end up asking, some more attention to those kinds of things. The other thing I think we might help us just take it off the table is that we just said, this is so dependent on the street plan. That does have to be a condition on this. That isn't just nice to see the street plan. We all need to see the street plan because otherwise it doesn't work. So those are my 2 takeaways.
So I agree with both of those comments, and I think I appreciate that you're developing a system, and that the system that this, I mean, it's very clear, and it was even clearer after your presentation, that is what's driving this station design, is what's happening at the 2 stations. So that needs to, and I'll be interested to get more into the Delbridge station later. I think on this station, I am inclined to make street design a condition, because these intersections don't work without a lot of help. I mean, in terms of design, signalization, the cross section. The only thing I'm reluctant about that is that we're essentially conditioning both Sound Transit and the city. And the city is not the proponent here, but they have a huge role to play. So I think we just have to say that, but I think it needs to be a condition anyway, just given the situation here. I mean, it's just, nobody wants to see somebody trying to catch a train, get hit by a car, going running across the street to catch the train. Nobody wants that. And so we just have to do everything we can to avoid the situation.
And to that point, Kevin, what I'm not really sure how to approach here, and I keep going back to the area context slide that has 1,200 average daily boardings, 32% are bus, 53% are walking. Mm-hmm. That's huge. And this triangle that has the main head house is in between 3 hugely heavily vehicle-based arterials, which I think, kind of to your point made earlier, I really struggle with those 2 divisive elements. So I don't really know when we can make the decision of, can we accept both head houses on the east side of Fauntleroy and no Sound Transit access on the west side of Fauntleroy, given an SDOT design that we accept being more safe to cross Fauntleroy, but if you don't think that it's safe enough, then it kind of comes back to Sound Transit. So we're a little bit in this, who has to make that work? I'm not quite sure how we can give that direction, but at least looking at this, how I do right now, with 3 heavy vehicle arterials and this being a 53% access by walking mode station, I think some type of access, and maybe I'm getting ahead of the sections here. It's gotta change.
There was also a lot of discussion about ventilation. So any thoughts or recommendations there?
So I think there are tiers of what we need to be asking for in regard to the ventilation and the fan plans. And so I think Susan brought up the question of, can this be descended into the ground to any degree, can be shifted to the side? Right now you have that approach from the west, that primary bike and pedestrian approach from the west is needing a fan plant that is a lot of blank walls, which are the city's design guidelines speak against that. Really tight sidewalks as you come around them, no views to the head houses. And so while we've prioritized the transit that does provide those connections down to High Point, which is a helpful equity component, we're really turning our backs on the pedestrian and bike environment on that west end. And so if it is, do we push it into the ground? Are there alternate locations for it off of that triangular site? Does it get skinnier to provide more views to the head house and then become more visible? You know, as event structure, does it demonstrate itself to be event structure and perform a gateway civic view to it form, right? And so there are really these tiers of, are there any opportunities for it to move? Are there any opportunities for it to tighten sideways, shift sideways, or to become more vertical and central so that there's more access around?
So I think that's getting to a recommendation. I think it's heading under what Sue's been asked to, like, consider alternative locations or means to do that thing. Because I agree with you 100% that in terms of, it's just how that greets people coming from that direction, which there are bike flows and pedestrian flows coming from, and hopefully more if Fauntleroy is redeveloped. So that's just, nobody wants a big blank wall there.
Yeah, and I guess I'd want us to talk a little more about like how serious of an issue we think this is. So I guess for me, it's pretty serious. I think it's pretty unacceptable architecturally in this location. And so I guess, I don't want the solution to be, we're going to cover that blank wall with art. I don't think that's acceptable either. So I think it has to be, either we find some solution of some significant portion of that bulk can move below grade, or this has to be the most awesome piece of architecture in the Sound Transit portfolio and it stays where it is, it's not, in my opinion, it's not sufficient to say we're gonna treat it with art or that we're gonna step it back. And, I know we're super early in PE and we're seeing a lot of different, massings kind of showing up in different diagrams that have been done at different times, but I think it just has to have a super uniform, beautiful expression as a building itself. If this is going to be the way we move, but I think we absolutely have to I think we have to see study of other alternatives.
And that's also sort of like relying on, it's not an architecture at that point, because it's not really placemaking, it's just sculpture. So you're relying on some sort of sculptural form, great, which I think inherently isn't very good urban planning, right? Like it's just not a good urban solution for that, what we want to have happen in that neighborhood.
Well, and I think just one more quick point. I think the vignettes. So I'll say I was actually more skeptical coming in than I currently am, and I think it's because seeing the future state of development. I mean, it's clear that there's going to be height around there eventually. So I think that's a very positive thing. I also, in the vignettes at the end, I think they start to hint at transparency from the north side, right? It's not on the corner. It's kind of.
Can we put those vignettes up on the?
And so I think if there is transparency on both sides, I think that also helps. But the corner is what's, I think, very problematic, right? And it's just super blank. So
I think this is,
Sorry, Jake, can we?
yeah, I've been trying to, sorry. We're just talking about it. Yeah, it is a 360 scenario. And given that there's no TOD there, then one can transfer. And if we all say, okay, we accept that this is the alignment and this is where the stations in the head are going to be, that it is, has a 360 revolution to it, and that needs to be treated as such. And I think it has potential to then be kind of, edifying and kind of stepping up to that sculptural element of, without being over the top, and I don't mean that, but something that actually calls attention to itself as a piece of civic infrastructure.
If you can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of it, you have to feature it.
Yeah. And it's like, and I would say, I was going to use the same word, I think it is unacceptable at that top. I mean, we're just totally ignoring with all the views and all the thoughts, down to the south, we're ignoring what it's like to be at the north. And people are coming from there, people are driving from there. I mean, this is part of our urban condition and it can't just be one, a blank wall, and then two, with an appendage back of house there. And I think that the goal should always be that it's an elevated, light rail is an amazing thing and it should be coming in and elevating something. Right now, we've had top of time there for, years, right? Like in a sunken hole, and this should be way better than that.
You don't want to miss time of time. Miss that.
Okay, sorry, Jay.
So I guess just, well, we can talk about, but I guess I'm just curious, do we need to condition coming to 30%? Like prior to that, do we need to see some pathway forward that's more
I think
articulated?
that, I mean, thank you, because I'm struggling with how to put this either as a recommendation or a condition. It sounds like it's raising to the level of a condition.
Like, I don't know, if we can move forward with this until we see a path that's not this, I guess, I don't know. So early designs, that's hard to say. So yeah, I guess that's what I'm struggling with.
Great, Jay.
Going back a little ways, back to the ventilation, the other element of that is it's not only a visual element, but it's a noise element. And if you stand on Fauntleroy, you cannot hear the person next to you. So we're adding more noise. And I want us to be mindful of that as well. And then going to the vignettes, what I don't see here is all of the traffic that's there. Show us these vignettes with what it actually looks like, which is a stream of semi trucks. Because that's really what, the pedestrian's going to be looking at, a backlog of cars. And we do need to be mindful of that's the visual impact. It's not going to be this nice, beautiful station. It will be, if I'm trying to walk across Fauntleroy, I'm going to see traffic, and that's it.
And to that point, I'm just wondering, this is more of a question. I don't know, pardon the pun, if the train has already left the station on this, but if we are still too far away from the initial proposal of there being pedestrian access on the other side of Fauntleroy, because it seems like it just is such a crucial part of accessing this wedge in 1950s car focused area that is going to change. So
possibly you need to see a cross section that proves why that can't work.
Yeah, it seems to me like I understand that there's monetary considerations that are real, but the pedestrian usage of this site is higher than the Alaska Junction. I know the numbers are higher at Alaska, but 53% here as compared to 40 for the other one. So I would like to see a little more argument other than just the economics of it, which I understand is a huge part of it, but we also know this area is transforming and this is a really exciting opportunity instead of just trying to wedge an impossible arrangement into providing a whole gateway, as people have been saying, also to that northwest side.
And I think, just to be clear, and I feel this way, and I assume my other commissioners feel this way, is we're not saying move it all over to the other side of Fauntleroy, because we hear that there has been a lot of community engagement with accessibility from the south. What we're saying is that although we may have a little bit more pulling us in that southward direction, it's maybe a little bit more, right? It's not, we're all in on the south. I assume I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm struggling with how to turn that into a recommendation, just given we're months away from the FEIS of the ROD here, right? So I think we might agree, and a lot of us might agree in concept. I think it's just, how do we, has the train left the station to use your so we can feel like, I'd rather focus on the street design and that intersection design, because I think that's more fixable at this point, but that's just me. I don't want to speak for the.
But even with that, I mean, the access point that we see at the head house in our triangle as it's in the middle of the Fauntleroy block. So even if the two ends of the triangle intersections are improved, you still have to kind of do a circuitous
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, on access. So I think, you know, we really need to see them together to know that they're gonna work.
So we either have two or we have three issues. Let's just sort that out, right? One is the blank wall and
Massing and.
the other is the street concept plan. And what Kevin's saying is put your energy in the street concept plan rather than worrying about having a third issue across the street. And or you were talking about conditioning things from the city and conditioning things for Sound Transit. It might be that you're asking for Sound Transit to come back and talk to you about why it's impossible across the street on a parallel track with the city presenting a quiet, calm down street. I mean, I think those two things could meet into a solution that would make people happy enough to move forward. I don't want us to lose track of what a tough place it is and how hard they work to get the Equus station out. And I want to make sure that we say that we truly understand that there's a lot of creativity at work to even have made this work. But I know that whenever I've had to present these things in the past, I end up saying it's that way because there's something off the page here and off the page there. I know I've just lost the argument, you know, because we're here to talk about the page, not the things off the page. So that's what I want us to balance in our, if we're going to condition this, and we're really thoughtful and specific about those conditions.
So I thank you.
Right in one decision.
Yeah, so go ahead, Fran.
Oh, I guess, I also want to include Sound Transit, right? This has been a very collaborative approach. I know you guys are right at sort of PE to final design handoff. How can we not get in the way of mass transit coming to Seattle? Because that is the primary goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we not get in the way of this great thing that's happening for a hopefully better station? What kind of back and forth can we go through on this to give you a conditional yes without mucking up everything, right? Because that's absolutely my worst thing is that we kill some sort of mass transit. There's some people out there that want that anyway, right?
Well, if people would like to kill the station, we don't want to be part of it.
Absolutely, right? How can we?
Is that a rhetorical question or?
Is that-
Oh, I was this way. I was thinking he wanted an answer, but.
We like you.
Yeah.
Please help us.
One thing that's really helpful from my/our perspective is to define the problem.
Yeah.
Set the stage for the problem, and then let's let our great consultant teams work with whatever the problem is to come up with creative solutions.
Yes.
So it's going to be really hard for any individual or group in this room to come up with a solution that's really going to hit it right off the bat. So the more you can define the problem, is the problem, we're concerned about the safety of passenger, of people crossing the streets. You know, how are you going to solve it? You know, SDOT and Sound Transit. So defining the problem is really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is it about the fan? It's not gonna have black holes. So, but what is it that's bugging you the most about it?
Right, yeah, right, like granted, the rendering right now, yeah, it's pretty mundane, you know, basic walls that just reflect the shape of the machinery. I totally get that. But if it were something a little, you know, if it was more intentionally designed, if it was thought of from that 360 view, is it the fact that they're blank walls without windows the issue, or is it just that it's right now it's just really not good looking? I mean, we do have, you know, walls in places in Seattle and some pretty nice buildings. So, so anyway, sort of, you know, defining the problems.
Okay, so we start trying to craft those then?
Yeah, I have another comment though I do want to raise. I have some concerns about the Prudhoe access, both from a standpoint of the current residents that are on Genesee. You know, when I took a look at those residencies, there's not off-street parking for them. They don't have garages. And with the width of that road, there's only room for one direction of traffic. So someone's got to pull off to the side to let the other person go through. You know, it's a residential road. So really only the way I see that working is to remove parking, which would mean that a lot of these residents, you're gonna need to convince them that, okay, the light rail station's coming in, that's all you need, you don't need to park. I'm not saying that that's possible, I'm just saying be prepared for that and consider that. The other part that I'm concerned about is that where you have the pullouts for the pull for the Kudo on the north side of Genesee, which means you would need to approach in from the east side, which is, if you're coming from, say, 30th, I'm not sure if this will make more sense if I could point on the screen. Could you go to one of the concept plans of the street grid? One has a street grid, please. That, or like, even the one that can like go out to include, yeah, this one, perfect. So if we have a lot of vehicle access on 35th, to drop someone off, you need to turn right, come along Avalon, turn left, come along Genesee, and then drop someone off and then get out, which to me seems pretty out of the way. So I'd also encourage you to look at, do we have to use Genesee? Can there be some other loop in here that comes off of 35th maybe, that comes off of Avalon, that we're really making note that there's a bicycle route there right now, and there's already a ton of conflict points with driveways along Avalon with these existing buildings. So really be mindful of where this access point is and look at, do you really want to use Genesee for that? And that's going to be something that I'll leave you to coordinate with SDOT and come back and talk with us, but I want to point that out.
If we roll that into the street concept plan, please.
Yes.
So I was gonna say, is that a separate recommendation or is that rolled into the project? Yeah.
Is that more of a street concept plan? Is that part of?
I don't think that's a street, because it's a local street. That's not gonna be part of the channelization discussion.
But I think it's.
We don't have a design there. We could talk about some of the circulation there. Yeah.
But ultimately, those streets have to meet streets illustrated and.
Yeah, there's also, I mean, is zoning changes sort of clear space on the streets also? Yeah, we don't have, we did not have design recommendations that also was sometimes presented there, but we can talk about some of that circulation.
Okay.
I will say, we have been, from the city side, I know there were comments about not wanting pickup drop off on the major arterials as well. And when you look around, there are not a lot of other opportunities.
That's all there are. I guess I just know that there's been some work that's gone on to get to here. I think there were alternatives considered and worked through. And so what forum could we hear about that and talk about that in? Open question, well, before we, because I don't think we're getting the full story.
No, and I think that would be my request, is to understand how this was decided on and what the plan is for how the use of Genesee is going to change, both in circulation and just the cross section of that street.
I do think that the zoning that's coming with the comp plan is going to change the makeup of many of these single family houses.
Sure.
And is something we can talk about, consider, because it's on the table.
I think it'd be interesting to understand where the pickup drop off people are coming from. I imagine that they're not coming from the dense areas with the bus access, right? They're probably coming from the northwest with the single family home areas, right? So it might all be one big solve.
But that's a great point. Like, even then, if they are coming from the northwest, how do they get there? What's the best way?
And if there is an access point on the west, then that's a pickup drop off type place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because nobody wants pickup drop off just ad hoc occurring in 35th or Follow.
Yeah.
Right. It creates an incredibly unsafe situation. So given that this is I agree with your concerns about Genesee, but it is the only non-arterial street that accesses.
If we make it so inconvenient and out of the way, then people are going to pull over on the bus anyway. Is if we make it not convenient. That's what I'm worried about, is if this seems too far out of the way to go get and go actually use, then we are going to see those ad hoc situations. But if we have it as you hinted at, there was some type of even pedestrian bridge over Fauntleroy or something, some access point on the west side of Fauntleroy that there could be Pudo over there that reduces the friction to get to where the Pudo is and then get from where the Pudo is to the entrance point. So I just want to have a little bit more understanding of how that was developed and addressing some of those potential concerns. I mean, if you can come back to us with an analysis of these 11% of people that are driving here to do Pudo are coming from the southeast, then I'll say, okay, cool, I'm good. But if that's not the case, then I think I want more clarity on, I don't think someone coming from the west is gonna try to navigate this triangle of madness to try to get over there for pickup.
So Jill, I think this is a separate recommendation from the street concept plan, right?
Okay.
Because it's not a channelization of arterial.
Right.
So I think the recommendation is bring back more information about pickup drop-off options that were considered and how this street would look.
Well, let's try the hierarchy of conditions from our recommendation.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Your notion of hierarchy within some of these things. I don't know if we can get there.
And I'm still, the blank wall issue.
Yeah, let's go back.
I think we need, is that a condition? Is it a recommendation? But what are we recommending?
I don't think it's a blank. I like the way that you stated the problem. You have a lot of smart architects and designers and engineers all can figure it out. I guess for me, you have to approve developments to the, I always get confused, south that are right across the street from that head station or the van station. How does it all kind of work together with those approved designs that are presumably going to go forward? What I've heard from the development community, they are. And how is this station going to work with those? Because it's all, if this is built in 2032, it's not that far off. Those are 2 or 3 year construction projects. They get them started. So how does that head house work with the street, with the projects across the street of Avalon, right? Avalon. And then it's not just a blank wall, because I agree there are blank walls, but the city specifically in design guidelines tries to minimize or eliminate as many of those they can facing the urban pedestrian frontage. So I'm really curious, like what could be a solution on that? And if I understand like everyone else says the money and we want the light rail to go here, so I don't want to kill it. To Brian's point.
Let's work on some language.
So it just shows how it is a good urban solution with the anticipated development of across
we
that
would like to, let's see, these are conditions and recommendations. Let's get some language around it first, right? That regarding that, go ahead, Brian.
Just a proposal. Our previous, this morning, we stripped the fan plan off and said it would be looked at in subcommittee later when we need more information. That sounds like this is another fan plant that probably needs the same amount of care and look. That sounds like a group, right? And it almost should come off of this. I think we have sort of pedestrian concerns and how that works. But the fan plant can be solved, I think, as a fan plan itself, and it should be solved with the other one.
Well, we are already going to propose, I think we are already going to propose a subcommittee look at street design.
So,
Are you proposing a separate subcommittee look at the whole?
again, let's decide what it is that we want, and then let's decide if it's condition or a recommendation. So one of the things, what I've heard people say is that it's in such a prominent location that the blank wall is unacceptable.
Yeah, and I guess I would agree with Ben to a degree that I think you shouldn't be too specific in the way we formulate the recommendation. So I think we should articulate, Julie, to your point, kind of articulate what we see the problems as being, and then.
So this is a very prominent location where aesthetics need to be considered as well as engineering. Good sense, right? Have we okay with that? Maybe that works for you, right? It needs to be studied from a 360-degree perspective with multiple creative disciplines to come back with some mitigations for what it is right now. Period. We don't use the word mitigation. Okay, don't use the word mitigation. To come back with, to improve its urban quality, its urban habitat.
And provide a cohesive design.
Yeah. Now, is that a condition because you're not gonna vote to approve this until you see that, or is that a recommendation? That's what everyone needs to decide.
So is
The
it,
barrier to you approving it, it becomes a condition.
I mean, I think, I don't know if I understand enough to know, I mean, I would rather the fan plant not be in that location, period. I
Yes.
think that it's not really, based on my limited understanding of what's gone on in the past and what, this is a dollar decision, engineering efficiency dollar decision that makes the station feasible, sort of, right?
It's almost right. It seems like it's
That's,
close to that.
if that's the case, then we make it a recommendation and not a condition. If there's an opportunity to not have it there, it would be a condition.
So you would vote to approve this even if that wasn't a condition?
I think so. And as a recommendation, understanding that they are going to work to solve it.
Okay, let's see where everyone else is on it. Not really good with this. I understand, but we need to decide if we're going to condition this or if we're going to just make this a condition. And go ahead.
I think that the condition of it going to subcommittee to see how, once we better continue to identify what the problems are, to look at potential solutions to those problems within subcommittee. Okay. Do others agree with that?
I think it could go to subcommittee. I think it could still be a recommendation as opposed to a condition. Because I appreciate Jill's semantics here. A condition is, I'm not going to approve it unless this happens, right? A recommendation is, we'd like to see this happen. Yeah. Right?
But I do have a recommendation.
Sure.
I'm comfortable with that being a recommendation.
I mean, I hate to see this in lose because,
Yeah.
but okay. So now let's go to the street. I'm getting a strong feeling that that's a condition.
I think that's a condition as well.
Okay. And there's two parts to it because it includes the concept plan and then some understanding of the drop off. Is that correct?
I think the pickup, I would personally, I would peel the pickup drop off and make that a separate recommendation. But if somebody feels differently, fine. Is that, Jay, is that such an important topic that you would say no if?
I think that's reasonable. I think we can make a recommendation to take a closer look at the Pudo and to come back with more information for us.
Yeah, that's where
Pudo. But I think where, what I get the feeling of, and for myself, in our heart of hearts of where we really want to address the issue is that where the station is, we really, to achieve things like Vision Zero, to achieve accessibility, we need to be looking at other streets that aren't necessarily Pudo.
Yeah, I think the reason it rises to the level of a condition here is, and you've been honest about acknowledging the challenges of this site, and it's obvious, it's huge challenges. Given that it's a triangle surrounded by three arterials. I don't want to say alternative. Three arterials with very high speeds and very high volumes. The station doesn't work without significant changes to the intersection design, and I think signalization and potentially channelization. So I think it's not 100% on Sound Transit. The city obviously has a huge role, Metro has a role, but I don't think we're comfortable approving it without seeing more on this. It's so integral. It's safety is the number one issue for everybody, and it's just to me, it's a safety issue. Given, especially as Kate brought up, there is not a access point on the west side of Fauntleroy, but it's bigger than that. It's like the people coming from south of Babylon are facing daunting intersection crossing too. So I think we do have condition language. written. I'll just read it. A subcommittee will evaluate the design of the streets in a separate meeting in the upcoming weeks. This approval is conditioned on the outcome of that review and whether there are adjustments needed to design of station access, such as entrance location, bike parking, sidewalk widths, and drop-off locations. Is that, and there, I think there could be more than just this one meeting.
So
In
you want to just make a note of
and I think
bus?
we need to see then the results of that at the next round of
You want to just make a quick note of bus in that as well? I think.
I'm sorry?
You want to make a note of bus in that as well? I think I heard bike, walking.
Yeah, bus. I think that's a good,
Bus.
yeah, bus stops.
I just want to check on the time frame there because I don't know what the SDOT timeframe is. And I don't know, I heard weeks, I'm not sure if that's a realistic.
So strike in the upcoming weeks.
What was the
When
question?
would you be ready to show us? Within a couple of weeks.
Schedule bus to 31st.
Yeah, by the end of the month.
I could say upcoming months too. You know, I think it's a matter of getting it right than the timing.
Strike that whole thing. All right, great. A separate meeting, period.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the condition we did not do for Alaska.
Correct.
But we feel strongly enough that we want our record, we want to improve this. So general program form, access and circulation. That's what these are coming out of, right?
Correct.
We have two more topics.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make sure we don't lose, because I think the sustainability and engagement equity is a really important topic here, particularly at this station. So anybody have any comments, thoughts, recommendations on that topic or those topics?
Yeah, I think we had a really good session this morning.
Okay. Sustainability.
Yeah, I really appreciate that conversation.
I mean, it's fair to say, I'm asking a question, sorry, that the engagement with the community is ongoing here, right, as part of all the next round. So I think the recommendations on the station design are integrally tied to what happens on the street design and the safety issues. So again, that's not just on Sound Transit, that's also on the city. So I don't think that needs to be a separate recommendation, but I think it's just super important that the community be brought along with all of this, because this area is going to evolve and change.
If we have time, I know it seems like we talked about it a lot, but I feel like there was a lot of people interrupting. But the guidance that Julie had asked for, we can talk about it generally. There's lots of guidelines, so it's from Sound Transit and the city, but I think the state place specific things, if we can pull them together again, because I know there were things on Gateway and relating to the thing across the street and everything. Can we just have one more short round where we just list kind of the message to send on where we would like to see this piece go? Interruptions was our dialogue. Yeah, I'm pretty well. Oh, just pretty good. But I think I think we might be missing a little bit. Like, I think there were some parts that we didn't flush out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess
Okay, so a major one I think is the sense of arrival and view to station, view to head house, view to glazing from the west. So when you're approaching from the major bike and pedestrian from the west, not being met only with solid wall and also having the space to move into any public spaces. So it feels like the current plaza may not be correctly oriented and the fan plant is where you want to be greeting pedestrians and bikers. So thinking about the relationship between where the fan plant currently is and where the plaza currently is and where you actually see into the head house as you approach from the west, I think is a problem to solve.
yeah, and I would just say, just holistically looking at the design of that head house, you know, and kind of showing that it fits in an urban context, you know, with materials, massing, you know, are there possibilities to introduce transparency on the west side? You know, can you read through some of those elements that are going up and actually have an entrance on that side, you know, even in its current form? I just think just those kinds of explorations, just to show that holistically it fits with what's going to be there, and also day one. Yeah.
Right.
So,
I mean, you use the word gateway, and that's really from the south, coming off the bridge. And so, I think there are some opportunities. I think if you look at it with the COT and other development to understand what, and maybe the answer to what to do with the fan is what would be a cool beacon coming from the south? Maybe you should just turn the problem around and something will jump up.
coming from the south or coming from the east?
Oh, you know, I can't. The right side of it. Coming off the bridge.
But also coming from the bridge.
Yeah.
Also coming from the east and seeing it as you're welcomed into West Seattle.
Especially northeast.
And I think also to build off of the, especially for people driving off of the Seattle Bridge, that they're coming out of a freeway environment and into an urban environment. Really emphasizing that transition, because this is the first intersection coming off that bridge where you are in limited access, you are in high speed. And I think this station is really going to play a huge part in transit. We're in urban environments, slow down. So.
And the retain cut here and the fencing that has to be part of that retain cut is really continuing that highway environment. And so it puts a lot of heavy lifting on these areas to be, in addition to the street concepts, to be this moment where cars are seeing that they're entering West Seattle, are slowing down, are entering a more urban environment of tighter spacing of buildings, and other buildings in the area have been acknowledged as gateways. And so we have to acknowledge those as gateway.
Are you talking about the east head house as well as the
East Head House as
we haven't
well.
talked about that one as much.
Right. So really, because this is continuing that highway condition by having this fencing here, your first moments now of feeling like you're within an urban environment where you might hit pedestrians, say, are as soon as you see these things. So the view coming toward them is really important to tell you that you're in this much tighter urban environment.
We haven't talked about that at all.
Right, I was actually going to come back to that because we've kind of been going all over the place, but there was a question about the cut, but we haven't had any comments or discussions about it.
I think I would go back to, it sounded like there was opportunity for some type of activation of that cut. I would make a recommendation that we can see what those opportunities would look like in following. And maybe some of that is activation from the kind of south side, the perspective of the more the residential pedestrian level, and some of it might be from the bridge side of these vehicles driving past it as well, and what opportunities are there to have some type of visual impact.
Can you describe what you mean by activation?
Activation being, I mean, if we want to have that pit be more than just looking down on the station, if we want to have art be involved in that space, either in the fencing or along the support structures, I think I just look at it from a perspective of it's a big space that I understand is for a lot of economic saving measures, but can it be also beneficial in other ways?
You guys know.
Yeah, so, yes, and I think, talking about it being, so you just described it being a gateway, and it's part of like the vehicular gateway as you come across the bridge. But then, you turn, it's bifurcated, right? So then you're, you're coming into the station, and then it's part of the pedestrian language. And so I do think there's really good opportunity, whether it's activation or even just like, that's what I was asking about, the height of the throw guard and where those beams are. I mean, I think there's an articulation that I'm sure the design team is thinking about, to think about that as a three-dimensional space that actually pulls that cut and makes that part of something that's interesting and elevating the idea of transportation, right? And what that can actually be as it like evokes something on that
And can you make the judge jealous? Totally.
Dancing.
What says I want to be down in there?
I also wonder if for the fencing on that cut that's facing the West Yellow Bridge, to your point, Molly, if there can actually be a material change that separates it from typical highway fencing, so you're already starting to cue that you're changing environments before you reach 35th. So just if there's a material connection between all of that streetscape, that starts sooner.
I think, you know, how we had been talking about the second head house, I mean, I think it can be really thought of. And the reason I talked about the second head house is the first one gets it and then you're kind of avoiding the cut, but the whole thing is one big unit, right? So conceptually, like when we're talking about 360, we're talking about coming off the bridge, we're talking about coming down Fauntleroy and thinking about how that all works in, you know, a cohesive, you know, articulation of kind of building blocks as they step, you know, higher, middle ground, down below. And I think, you know, and I think that there really can be something kind of explicit about it. It just needs to be shaped.
I think that's a good design challenge, is instead of three different disparate things, how do you make it one thing? How do you make it legible and understandable with that whole thing? Then a piece here and a piece here and a thing underground. How do you make one out of it? That might lead to some really interesting solutions to some of these things. We're tripping over.
And maybe it's not really a fence, but more of part of the structure that's separate. I was thinking like the sculpture part where you have the concrete that comes up and out of the cut, and that becomes your barrier.
So it's a, sorry, I'm just trying.
Now we're into the design. Yeah.
I'm trying, we're a lot of words here.
All right.
So it's the recommendation, I'm just trying to get to this, that Sound Transit look at opportunities for the cut. And I think you used the word activate broadly. It was like visually activate as well. It's just that you were talking about having people hanging out and having picnics there and stuff. But look at materials, art, fence treatments, wall treatments. And I think what we want is, I think it's all a really point well taken. This is an opportunity to be not just a gateway for Sound Transit, but a gateway for the city and the neighborhood. Like you're now entering an urban neighborhood. You're not on a freeway anymore. That's enormously challenging. But the design of that, I think both of those head houses and that cut are going to be a big signal to not just people riding the train, but I think people on the roadway too, that you're now entering a different environment.
But there's, yes, and design cohesion and, and integrating the elements into one statement is the way to get to that. So I would have to advocate for that.
I would say it has like,
Be that involved in that
So
direction.
design cohesion.
yeah, as opposed to saying fence treatments, like I think don't get the piece, like don't get the travel corridors.
Yeah.
Like little pieces, but it's the whole.
And I think there's something about the legibility of it as a whole, so that this is a cut that's part of a line. This is a vent structure that is doing something visible, celebrating itself from an engineering perspective as a vent to this tunnel, because that's a cool thing, right? Is that we have this tunnel that then continues to the next section. We have this coming down from the guideway. And right now, what we're seeing is a blank brick or whatever material it may be. We're looking at these blank facades that aren't telling me what that thing is. And it could be a cool thing. If we can resolve some of the problems about seeing past it and feeling safe around tight edges, and then have it be something that tells me what it is in an exciting way. So legibility, all that, just say legibility.
We all know what we're talking about.
Yeah, legibility as well.
And tell us. Okay, so Kevin, we can start to pull this together.
So I do want to, on behalf of the existing teams, right, I'm not in it, but I know a lot of people that have been working on this. As the design goes forward, they're going to be thinking about how to make this beautiful and part of the neighborhood, right? So I I think we should trust our peers and say that there's gonna be some good design. I think this is a early stage that we do want to say, how about connecting across the road, right? Because I think that is the biggest thing that we've all talked about. I think there's some shake that happens following that ability. Maybe it changes form, maybe it changes how we do it. I don't want them to get lost in we want board form concrete on this particular, no, right? It's, this is an important station. Let us dream with you about what it could look like. Obviously, it's your station. We're concerned about the neighborhoods. And I think that's where I would leave us at a much higher level at this stage. I can get overruled, but.
And I would say I'm comfortable with, because I have mentioned the idea of it being a condition, the family room components being a condition. I'm comfortable with it being a recommendation.
With what being?
With the fan room component being a recommendation.
Yeah.
And I think I was up when you said condition. Is that accurate?
But to Brian's point, I think in the accessibility area, one thing that maybe wasn't noted that I would like more clarity on, that we talked about a bit, is just a little more explanation about if it just needs to be an argument on why it's completely impossible to have access on the other side of Fauntleroy pedestrian access.
Yeah, I think you can ask us these studies. We also need to see studies about the drop-off. So those are things coming outside of the condition of the street.
So you just want more information from Sound Transit on that?
I think they want to be convinced that it just doesn't work.
And if it doesn't
Or
work,
what
or
is
if
the
not,
cost to make it work?
Yeah, if
There
it,
might be some value. I think that's something that, isn't that our job as commissioners to say, if we're doing some public money expenditure, that we consider the value out of it.
and what those costs might be, because I can certainly see circumstances here in which we end up with these same access points, same locations, but maybe there is something here for Sound Transit to partner with SDOT. I know that happened with Northgate, with the pedestrian bridge across I-5. We're not strictly speaking over a freeway here, but close to it. So are there opportunities, if cost is such a factor here, to not have, from Sound Transit perspective, access across Fauntleroy? Is there still partnership opportunities with you and SDOT to go above and beyond just what can you do on busy Fauntleroy? Also want to make note of that might be a little cheaper. It still adds some expense, but it's cheaper than completely changing what the station design is.
Okay, so before we try to focus together, it's gonna happen, but any recommendations on we've talked about a lot of things we'd like to see more information about, which is kind of getting to what we want to see in the 30% design. But is there anything that hasn't come up that anybody wants to mention on that as a recommendation? I think we've hit the big issues, but I just want to move on until we get that. Okay. So, boy, all right, I'm gonna. This is good. I mean, honestly, this is because this event thing, I've heard 4 different ways of expressing this. So it's just, I'm kind of lost on what we want to say, but I'm going to try. Yeah. So I think we are contemplating improving preliminary engineering for the Avalon station with a condition that I read earlier relating to a subcommittee looking at meeting in a separate meeting or meetings, because I think it might be more than one meeting, to look at streetscape, sidewalk widths, crossings, channelization, bus stops, all of it. So we've got that as a condition. I think our recommendations, one, I think there was a recommendation, we want more information on pickup drop off, in terms of why it's there, or could it be done separately? I think that's just something we would like more information about next time we come back. I think and then I think I heard a recommendation about design cohesiveness around looking at the entranceway, portal, the head houses, and I know you're in PE, you're not, there's a lot more design to do, but I think we're all looking to see that, like how this all works together as a cohesive whole, as a station, with the challenge of there being a portal right there in the retained cut. So I think that's a recommendation. I think with regard to the venting blank wall issue, really, I sort of like the way Phoebe articulated that, which is to look at that, all of that from a 360 location, and just, not just looking at it from the west, but looking at it overall, including like why, just more information about why the vent is there or needs to be there. But really the bigger issue is just how do we solve it from a design standpoint, right?
Right, and what's the goal towards more visibility?
More visibility, more legibility, more transparency, et cetera, et cetera.
Within the context.
Yeah.
Of the neighborhood that is anticipating, if that's what that's.
And then, let's see. Then I think the last one was just understanding more explanation and understanding about the station access on the west side of Fauntleroy. Why isn't that possible, or what could be done to make it more possible, like a grade separated, the possibility of like a grade separated crossing, which would obviously be a partnership between Sound Transit and the city. It was different at Northgate because it was crossing the freeway, but I think you wanted that stated as a recommendation. Is that correct?
That's
I think those are the big things.
Not broadly though, too, it's broadly and just how to cross home.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just, I mean, I think this is relating to the specific question about there not being a station access on the west side of Fauntleroy. The crossing street issue is a bigger issue that I include, not just the crossing of Fauntleroy, but the crossings at Avalon too.
And for my clarity of, I remember you read what that subcommittee was going to review, but also just to be clear here before we get into the vote, we're approving this with the condition that we're going to look at that street design. And the kind of two scenarios that I see coming out of that discussion are, we're happy with the street design that allows this Sound Transit design to move forward, or the street design that we see, we don't think that means this works. Is that true?
I think if it's a condition, then I think we need to be satisfied that the ultimate street design is going to make the station and these access points feasible.
So is that putting essentially the onus on SDOT, and we're approving
It's a
Sound
good question.
Transit?
It's a good question.
Or are we leaving space for after our subcommittee meeting to come back and say, ultimately, after discussion and seeing SDOT's, what they can do and what they can bring to the table, that this might need to change?
So I would not go there.
And that's why I want to make sure that I have clarity on.
I think we have many more meetings, we have many more phases of this. And we are going to ask them to go do their best to bring us a street plan. And if the next time we see this, we still have these concerns, we can not vote to approve that. But I don't think that we should anticipate that we aren't going to continue to involve in this.
Okay.
I mean, we will be voting at 30%. Well, I mean, we'll be taking action at different ways along the way too.
There's a lot of bites of the apple.
Right.
Yeah, I just
Okay,
wanted,
there's
I just
three.
wanted to make sure I understood what our condition was for the subcommittee and where that,
I think where you're going, Jay, is, okay, there's a condition, but then what? And I think the answer is we don't, like, I'm not sure we don't.
yeah.
What, but then what?
We can't sit on that.
It's sort of a chicken and egg.
Yeah.
thing, you know,
Yes.
it's three
Yeah, we can
different
determine that
stations.
later. I just wanted to know if that needed to be done.
So before we call the question, is there any condition, or recommendation that I missed in that?
I don't know if you just want to make a statement that, you know, like a positive statement. That we thought the equity issues were handled well in the general piece. I do think that we should say right early that we really appreciate the challenges of keeping the station viable and very much.
Yeah, I think,
I agree.
thanks, Sheila. Before we vote, I think I wanted to say that I think everybody at the table and in the audience understands the design challenges here. We understand the issues you're dealing with as an agency about delivering a really complicated project. And that you are hearing from the public about what they wanted to see in Del Ridge and what they wanted to see at Alaska Junction, right? I think what we all want to make sure, and I'm including, when I say all, I mean you too, is that doesn't mean this is we're making really bad design decisions here because of what's happening at the two ends. I mean, this station has to function like all the other ones. And so that's just, I know you all, you know that and you think that, but I think all of our comments here are based on that common goal. Everybody wants the station to work and be an important part of the urban framework and really help incentivize things that the city wants to see in terms of redevelopment and more density, et cetera. And so I think I'm confident we can get there, but you know, the challenges are what they are. So I think we're looking forward to seeing more work down the road. But thank you for all the work to date, and thanks for the presentation. So with that, again, the motion would be design commission approves preliminary engineering phase for the Avalon Station with a condition recommendation noted. We'll start down at this other end with Brian.
I approve. I like this, and I think we can work things out as a team.
I approve as well, and thank you for your summary. Appreciate it.
Jill?
Oh, I approve.
Approve.
I approve with the conditions and recommendations, and thank you all.
Approve with the conditions.
Approve with the conditions and recommendations.
Thank you, approve.
Also approve it by some miracle, we're 10 minutes early, so that was a lot of work and a lot of information, and everybody, I thought everybody did a really great job here today, so.
Yeah. Yes, I think, yeah, I hope that's usable. Oh, of course.